All right, so we've covered a lot. We've covered how arguments work and why you can't wing it. We've talked about building strong assertions and thesis statements that are actually worth betting on. And lastly, we just talked about embedding evidence so your reader can follow you. So now this is the one where everyone struggles with, but it's really the most important. It's the commentary. So what happens is you give me a great assertion, maybe some solid evidence, and then you just move on. Or worse, you explain what the quote means like I'm 5 years old. You're doing the wrong kind of work. You're explaining the text when you should be explaining your argument. You want to take me from the known to the unknown. The known is the denotation level of the argument, like what the text means. We are at the same level. That's where we're starting. Now you want to take me into what you're thinking that's specific to you. What you need to understand is if it's obvious enough that it doesn't need explanation, then it's not a strong enough argument. So again, if it's obvious enough that it doesn't need explanation, then it's not a strong enough argument. Okay, so if the connection between your evidence and your claim is obvious, you're probably, I hate to tell you, at the bottom of the ladder. So your commentary is where you do the work of climbing up. So let me break this down. A lot of you think commentary means explaining the quote. That's the shorthand that you've given yourself. So that might even be something like this metaphor shows, or the author uses symbolism. So those are obvious. We can get to the next step, which is analysis. So the author uses symbolism in order to something bigger. We're getting into analysis, and that is really important. But it's only half of commentary. We do need that, but we also need reasoning. So commentary equals analysis plus reasoning. And the reasoning is how that analysis is going back and proving your assertion. So this is where you're interpreting what happens in the evidence when we're doing the analysis, what happens in the evidence and what this metaphor means for what the author is doing. So not just like the author is comparing X to Y. That's known, is basically evidence. But what it's showing and what the author is doing, that is analysis. But then we have reasoning where we're connecting it to your assertion and your argument. So why does that matter for your claim, and how does that prove your point? What does that reveal about your thesis? So you need to have both pieces. You need to have the analysis and also the reasoning. Those two pieces together make up your commentary. And a lot of you either stop at this is a metaphor, or you stop at the analysis, like the author is using this quote to do something. So depending on what, like maybe that was just what your assertion is. But if you've gotten a more sophisticated assertion, it really should go beyond that analysis and go into more reasoning that needs to tie your analysis back to your assertion. That's what makes commentary, those two pieces together, the analysis and the reasoning. So the problem with obvious connections is you think, well, isn't it obvious how this proves my point? And that should be a red flag to you because it means that your argument isn't complex enough. So if the connection is obvious, you're at level 1 or 2 on the ladder and you need to push it higher. So think about math class. You can't just write down the answer. You have to show your work. You have to show me how you got there. And that's what commentary is doing. I need to see your thinking. You need to walk me through it. Don't make me fill in the blanks. That's your work. Don't assume I see what you see. You have to show your... Okay, so the key, I know, is asking instead of, like, we have these 5 questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how, 6. So the key is to ask why and how. These 2 questions are what force you past summary and simple analysis and into actual reasoning. So here's what you need to do. I've got 3 essential questions for you, and they all ask why and how. And you can use these to turn your analysis into commentary by adding that reasoning. So let me show you. Okay, so the first one is interpret the evidence. So why does this matter? What does it reveal, show, suggest? I know what is a what question and not a why, but it all fits within why does this matter? So this is your analysis piece. So you're not going to just summarize what happens. You're not going to just label it. You're not going to say this is a metaphor. You're not going to say this is a metaphor comparing X to Y. That is still just labeling. You're going to interpret why this metaphor being comparing X to Y matters. What does it reveal? What is it showing about the character, the theme, the situation? And I think that these are actually great to think about. You can go back to characterization, theme, situation all the time because that's going to show you something bigger. So you're trying to take that smaller piece, this metaphor, and compare it to something larger like character development, theme, situation. So dig into what it means, not just what it is. And then you're going to connect to the assertion. How does this prove your specific claim? And this is the reasoning part. You've interpreted the evidence, which is great and important. Now connect it to your assertion. How does this interpretation move us to that specific claim you're making? And you need to make that link really explicit. Don't make me guess. Show me the connection between what the evidence shows and what you're arguing. And then finally, you're going to, surprise, stack your deck. Why does this strengthen your overall case? So zoom out. How does this piece of evidence and commentary build toward your thesis? Why does it matter for your bigger argument? Every paragraph should be stacking your deck and making your overall case stronger. So show me how this piece contributes to the whole. So 3 questions, all using why and how. And these questions force you to work on commentary, interpreting, and reasoning. So don't skip them and don't assume the connections are obvious. You want to answer all 3 all the time. All right, so let me show you what this looks like with our Katie Couric example. When Katie Couric asked, what is internet anyway? She reveals her confusion about emerging technology. Okay, so that's analysis. I've interpreted what the moment shows, but I haven't connected it to my argument yet. That's not commentary. It's just explaining the clip. When Katie Couric asks, what is internet anyway? She reveals not just personal confusion, but a broader institutional dismissiveness toward technology that challenges existing media power structures. This proves my assertion that establishes figures delegitimizing disruptive technology rather than engaging with it, because her question frames the internet as incomprehensible rather than something worth understanding. So this defensive posture protects her position as a traditional media gatekeeper. Okay, so I'm not even sure that this is like a great argument as far as the evidence shows once we go into it. But this is, I think, the point that I'm really going to have to use some evidence to support that this is the case. But this strengthens my overall argument by showing how skepticism often serves institutional self-preservation rather than that genuine risk assessment. So what's going to need to happen here is I need to bring in some strong evidence to show that this is the case. So because if you're thinking about this with me, you'll be like, wait, is that actually true? Let me show you. I have to bring in some evidence. So you can see that I've done a piece of this work, but in a package, right? I've shown the analysis and the reasoning, but to really have a strong argument, I'm going to need to do that several times. I've interpreted the why it matters and how it connects to my specific assertion, and I've showed how it builds toward my thesis, but it is not the overall argument because the overall argument is bigger than that. But the connection isn't obvious. Someone could definitely disagree with my interpretation, and that's how you know you're high enough on the ladder. But that's also based on me saying like, okay, I really do need to have stronger evidence to really prove this argument. That's showing that my argument is sophisticated enough that I can't just prove it with one quote. So that's commentary. It's analysis plus reasoning, and it's interpreting what the evidence means and connecting it to your argument, answering why and how. So there we go. And that is it. That is all 4 videos. You know how arguments work, how to build strong assertions, embed your evidence, and write commentary. You've got the tools, you've got the strategy, and now you can stack your deck. But for this one, just a final reminder, analysis plus reasoning equals commentary. Show your work, ask why and how, and keep climbing the ladder. Good luck. Ask me any questions, and thank you for watching.